He wasn't supposed to answer the phone. A cleaner, working late, invisible in the shadows of a billion-dollar empire. One wrong number, one desperate voice on the line. And in that moment, the man everyone overlooked held the key to saving the company's most powerful client. But instead of recognition, what followed was something darker. Suspicion, hostility, and the kind of judgment you don't escape just by doing the right thing. Because in this world, skin color spoke louder than truth. What happened next would test not only his strength but the limits of justice itself. He thought the call was fate, but it was only the beginning. Deshaun Tillman wasn't a man people noticed. By day, he scrubbed polished floors that gleamed like glass, emptied wastebaskets that overflowed with things others discarded, and wiped fingerprints off doors that opened for everyone but him. He took pride in the small details, even if no one ever said thank you. The skyscraper wasn't his world. It was just where he worked. The boardrooms belonged to people in pressed suits and polished shoes. Deshaun belonged to the night shift, the silence, the spaces no one thought twice about. He didn't complain. He needed the job. With bills waiting at home and a family counting on him, he carried his dignity in quiet ways, in work ethic that never slipped. Yet beneath the calm routine was a truth he knew well. No matter how hard he worked, most people only saw his skin, never his worth. So when the phone rang that night, an extension left open by mistake, Deshaun hesitated. He shouldn't have picked it up. He wasn't trained for this. But something in the voice on the other end, urgent and frantic, made him listen. What he didn't know was that answering that call would drag him into a storm he could never have prepared for. He thought it was just another mistake. But it was the moment everything began to unravel. Deshaun pressed the receiver to his ear, his fingers still damp from cleaning solution. On the other end, a man's voice cracked with panic. An international client calling in the middle of the night, demanding answers about a billion-dollar deal teetering on collapse. The line was supposed to go to the CEO's office. Instead, it landed in the hands of the janitor. Deshaun could have hung up, but he didn't. He listened, asked questions, and, drawing from years of quiet observation inside that glass tower, gave directions that steadied the client. By the time the call ended, the client was calmer, even grateful. But inside the building, gratitude was the last thing Deshaun received. The next morning, executives swarmed. Whispers spread like wildfire. The cleaner had interfered in matters far above his pay grade. Some accused him of overstepping. Others hinted he had no right to speak on behalf of anyone, let alone the company. By noon, he was summoned to the top floor. The marble gleamed under fluorescent lights as if mocking his scuffed boots. Waiting in the boardroom was Vanessa Aldridge, the CEO, whose name made investors tremble. Her eyes were sharp, her tone colder than the glass walls behind her. To her, it wasn't about whether Deshaun had helped. It was that someone like him had dared to speak at all. His skin, his uniform, his title, all reminders of where she thought he belonged. Instead of praise, she called his act reckless. Instead of thanks, she questioned his motives. Around the table, men in tailored suits smirked, whispering judgments they didn't bother to hide. Every word carried the same message: know your place. But Deshaun didn't shrink. He explained exactly what had happened, how he'd prevented a meltdown that could have cost the company millions. His voice was steady, but he saw the disbelief in their eyes, not because his story lacked proof, but because they couldn't accept that the man sweeping their floors had saved what they couldn't. And then came the insult that cut deeper than any reprimand. One executive leaned back, folded his arms, and said, almost laughing, "So what are you now, the new CEO?" Laughter rippled through the room. Not everyone laughed, but no one stopped it either. That was the moment Deshaun understood. It wasn't about rules or protocol. It was about race, about status, about a line drawn in silence that he had dared to cross. He hadn't embarrassed them with failure. He had embarrassed them with success. And that, in their eyes, was unforgivable. Still, the client's relief was undeniable. Word began to leak that the billionaire across the ocean had specifically asked for the man who answered the call. He wanted to speak to Deshawn again. Suddenly, the company that wanted him silent found itself trapped. They needed him. The janitor they mocked was now the only bridge keeping their biggest client from walking away. The pressure shifted like a storm rolling in. Executives scrambled to control the narrative. Some wanted to hide Deshawn completely, to pretend he was just a mistake. Others argued to use him quietly, without giving him credit. But what they didn't know was that Deshawn had no intention of being invisible anymore. Because the next call was coming, and when it did, the stakes would explode far beyond the boardroom. He thought the worst was behind him, but the real test was only seconds away. The second call came just after midnight. The client's voice was trembling, the deal hanging by a thread. Everyone else in the room had tried and failed to reassure him. Millions, maybe billions, were on the line. And when the client demanded, "Put Deshawn back on," the air went heavy. Reluctantly, they shoved the phone toward him. Every executive leaned in, waiting for him to stumble, to expose himself as an imposter. But Deshawn spoke with calm authority, walking the client through the crisis step by step, until the man on the other end finally exhaled and said, "Thank you. You just saved us." The line clicked dead. Relief swept the client overseas, but inside that boardroom, relief never reached Deshawn. Instead of applause, silence thickened. Then the whispers began again. "Lucky guess. Doesn't mean anything. Don't let him think he's important." Each word chipped away, not because they were true, but because of what they revealed, that no matter how much he delivered, they refused to see him. And then, in a moment he would never forget, Vanessa herself cut through the noise. She looked at him, her voice sharp, and said, "Don't think for a second this changes who you are here." The room froze. It didn't matter that he had just protected their empire. It didn't matter that their most valuable client wanted only him. What mattered was that he was black, a janitor, someone they had decided didn't belong at their table. Success hadn't lifted him. It had threatened them. The humiliation was deliberate, a warning etched in the air. "You can save us, but you'll never sit with us." And in that instant, Deshawn felt the full weight of a truth too many before him had carried, that no matter how bright you shine, prejudice will try to dim your light. His chest tightened, not with fear, but with fire. He realized this wasn't just about a phone call. It was about every door that had been slammed, every smirk, every silent judgment. They wanted him to shrink back into invisibility. Instead, he stood taller. His silence spoke louder than their laughter ever could. Because for the first time he saw clearly. The power was never theirs to give. But what he chose to do with that power would define everything that came next. He thought he had saved their client, but in truth, he was about to save something much bigger. When the deal finally closed, the company celebrated. Executives raised glasses, bonuses were whispered, and Vanessa's name once again flashed across headlines as the woman who had secured their future. But in every article, in every press release, Deshawn's name was missing. The man who had steadied the storm, who had kept the client from walking away, was erased. For Deshawn, the silence was louder than any thank you. He had proven his worth beyond measure, yet the system bent itself to pretend he hadn't. That night, walking out of the skyscraper's glass doors, he didn't feel defeated. He felt exposed. He had seen the truth up close. Even when a black man saves the empire, he is still treated as disposable. The impact wasn't just personal, it was generational. His story echoed those of countless others whose brilliance was ignored, whose loyalty was questioned, whose labor was used but never honored. It revealed a brutal reality, that racism doesn't always come with slurs or violence. Sometimes it comes with silence, with omission, with carefully crafted lies that keep the powerful comfortable and the invisible unseen. And yet there was power in his story, too, because the client never forgot his name. The whispers in the boardroom turned into rumors outside those walls, and slowly, people began to ask, who was the man behind the call? Deshaun knew recognition might never come the way it should. But he also knew this: every injustice leaves a mark, and every mark carries a question. How many more stories like his will be buried before we admit the truth? Because this wasn't just about one man. It was about the world we live in. A world that praises resilience while creating the very barriers that demand it. A world that benefits from black brilliance but refuses to honor it. So the question is no longer whether Deshaun proved himself. He did. The question is whether we will finally see him, and the millions like him, for who they are. And if not now, then when?